My true story, from Tennessee. I came home early from vacation. My suitcase was outside, and my son's note said, "Sorry, Mom, we need the space." I slept in my car that night. By morning, they were the ones outside. "Elderly trash, we're tossing you out tonight." Derek's voice exploded in the hallway like a firecracker, raw and blistering. His eyes burned with a rage I had never seen on his face before, not even as a teenager when he slammed doors and screamed about curfews. He reached forward and yanked my backpack from my shoulder so hard that my arm jerked back with it. The zipper snapped. Something fell out. An old scarf, I think, but I was too stunned to move. "Find somewhere else to sleep," Kelly added with an icy calm, arms crossed over her chest. "Under a bridge, in your car, I do not care. Just do not make this our problem anymore." Her voice held no hesitation, no quiver, no shame. It was smooth and calculated, like she had rehearsed it in the mirror. She stood there barefoot, her perfectly manicured toes curling slightly against the hardwood floor, as if she were disgusted to be standing near me. I did not reply. I could not. My mouth had gone dry, and my heart was beating too loud for words. I bent down, picked up the scarf without looking at either of them, and wheeled my suitcase to the front door. It wobbled and tilted, the plastic wheel catching on the edge of the rug like it always did. I had bought that suitcase 23 years ago for my honeymoon with their father. Now it was dragging behind me like a wounded limb. Outside, the stars were sharp, brittle things. Unmoving and cold, the porch light flickered above me, casting a sickly yellow hue over the steps. I paused, just once, to look back at the house that had once been filled with bedtime stories, Sunday roasts, and piano practice. The windows were dark. The home I built was no longer mine. I walked to my old Buick, the one they said was too ugly to park in the driveway. It smelled like forgotten paper and peppermint oil. I folded myself into the front seat and pulled a blanket from the back. It was thin, the kind I kept for roadside emergencies. I wrapped it around my shoulders, but it did nothing for the chill that had settled in my chest. I slept in the car that night, alone and shaking, with the engine off and the air bitter. I had raised them, and now they had exiled me like an intruder, but I made no sound. Even in the silence, I would not give them the satisfaction of hearing me break. The morning came quietly, as if ashamed of what it had to reveal. The sky was still gray when I opened my eyes. My back ached, my knees had stiffened into knots. I looked up and saw a garbage truck idling in front of the house. Its engine growled low, steady. Then I saw them, Derek and Kelly, hauling my things from the garage and dragging them toward the curb. The garage door was wide open, like a mouth unhinged. Inside, I could see piles of my belongings stacked like forgotten trash. I stepped out of the car slowly, trying to make sense of the scene. My wedding dress, sealed in plastic, yellowed with age, was in a heap next to a cracked lamp. The photo albums, the kind you cannot replace, were in a cardboard box that had gotten wet. One of them slipped, spilling pictures onto the concrete. Derek at 4, holding a frog. Leah asleep on my chest in the hospital. Me in the garden, smiling beside their father. "Hey," I shouted. It was the first word I had spoken in nearly 12 hours. My voice cracked like thin ice. Kelly turned and saw me walking toward her. She rolled her eyes and hurled a pillow at my feet. "We have been more than kind. You should be grateful we did not just dump it all at the landfill." Her tone was theatrical, righteous even. She picked up a small trash bag, one of the ones from the bathroom, and opened it. "Here, take this too." She stepped forward and dumped the contents over me. Toilet paper wrappers, makeup wipes, old receipts, some cigarette butts, and crumbs from Derek's late-night snacking fluttered down like ashes. I stood still, not flinching, not blinking. "Get out of our lives already," Kelly barked. "No one wants to look at you." Her words sliced deeper than the winter air. Derek, who had been silent, finally spoke. "You stink like an old shoe, you know that? Even the dog avoids you." He snorted a laugh, tossed a broken toaster into the pile, and then added with venom, "Why don't you call Leah?" "Oh, that's right, she ran away just like Dad did. Left you to rot." That one hurt. Not because it was true, but because he wanted it to be, because he needed it to be. I said nothing. I bent down and started picking up the photographs, one by one. My knees cracked as I crouched, but I kept going. I found a picture of Leah in her graduation gown, her face flushed with pride. Another of Derek as a baby, asleep in the bassinet I had sewn myself. The corners were frayed, the memories still intact. I kept my eyes on the ground. I did not let them see my face. My hands were shaking, but not from the cold anymore. Something inside me had shifted. Not snapped, but realigned. I remembered how many nights I had held Derek through fevers, how I had fought the school board to keep Leah in her art program, how I had eaten less just so they could have seconds. All of it. Every small and quiet sacrifice I had made like breathing. They thought they could throw me away. They thought their cruelty would silence me. But they had forgotten one thing. I remember everything. I placed the photos into my suitcase, one by one, carefully. I tucked the scarf over them like a shroud. Then I picked up a cracked mug, my favorite one, the one with "World's Best Mom" in faded letters, and held it in my palm. It was chipped now, the handle broken. But I would not leave it behind. I looked up at them, not with anger, but with something far more dangerous. Clarity. I zipped up the suitcase. The sound echoed down the driveway, louder than any scream. This was not the end. This was the beginning. I stood in the middle of the driveway, the morning chill brushing against my skin like ice needles. My suitcase sat at my feet, half-zipped, with fragments of a life they tried to erase still inside. I looked up at the house I once owned, once ruled, once prayed over. It no longer felt like mine, but the deed still bore my name. I pulled out my phone with a steadiness that surprised even me. The screen glowed against the early gray. I opened my contact list and pressed a name I had not used in months, William Morales, attorney at law. He answered on the third ring. "Mrs. Caldwell?" I did not waste time. "William, I need to lock down the trust. Effective immediately." There was a pause. "Are you okay?" "No," I said, "but I will be. I need the trust reactivated and any further access by Derek or Kelly blocked. They threw me out of my own house this morning. The assets are at risk." He inhaled sharply. "Understood. I'll get on it right away. I'll need your signature and a list of financial institutions. I'll be in touch." I ended the call. Then I called my daughter. It rang once, twice. On the fourth ring, she answered. "Mom?" Her voice, sweet and alarmed, broke something inside me, just a little. "Leah, sweetheart." "Mom, what's wrong?" "They kicked me out. Derek and Kelly. They put my things outside and dumped trash on me. I slept in the car." Silence. Then I heard it. A breath caught, not quite a sob. "I'm coming home," she said, "as soon as I can get a flight." "No," I said gently, "do not rush. Just tell me what I can use. What can help me fight this?" Leah paused, thinking. "The security cameras," she said finally. "The ones Derek and I installed last year. You remember? After you slipped on the back steps? The system backs up to cloud storage. I still have access. I will give you the permission." I blinked. I had forgotten all about them. "There should be footage of everything," she added. "The shouting, them dumping your things, the threats. Use it. Mom, do not let them erase you." When the call ended, I stood straighter. For the first time in years, I felt something unfamiliar stir in my chest. Resolve. I went to the community library 2 towns over. Derek had blocked my Wi-Fi at home months ago, saying it interfered with their network. At the library, I accessed the camera system using the login Leah had texted me. There they were, clear recordings. Kelly throwing a bag of trash over me. Derek grabbing my arm and calling me names I would not repeat. My voice, quiet. My posture, still. My pain, visible. I downloaded them all. Then I started a new folder on my desktop. Evidence. Each night, I made tea, jasmine or chamomile, whatever kept my nerves from unraveling. I read through the original trust documents my husband had signed before he passed. Derek had manipulated my grief back then, saying he would handle it all. I nodded, too numb to understand what I was giving away. Now I studied every word like it was scripture. I took notes. I highlighted terms. Irrevocable, breach, elder abuse, power of attorney. During the day I exercised lightly, walk around the block, stretching to keep my joints from locking. I was not preparing for revenge. I was preparing for court. One afternoon, while sorting through my medical statements, I found something strange. A bill for a life insurance policy I had never signed. It listed Kelly as the beneficiary. The policy had been opened 6 months ago, with forged documents. Camille, the local insurance rep, was listed on the file. I remembered her. Bright smile, loud voice. I called her. "Hi, Camille. This is Mrs. Caldwell. I need to ask you about a policy under my name, one I never authorized." There was silence, then a nervous laugh. "Oh, I thought Derek." "Derek what?" I asked, my tone quiet but firm. Camille stammered. "He said you were forgetful, that he had to manage things." I thanked her and hung up. Another note went into the folder. Later that week, I found a copy of a bank withdrawal form with my forged signature. $10,000, transferred into Kelly's personal account. They had been bleeding me dry while smiling at my casseroles. I recorded everything, the whispers, the paperwork, even voicemail messages Derek left on my phone, warning me not to stir up trouble. I stirred. The last clip I saved was from the living room camera. It showed Derek yelling into my face while Kelly stood behind him, arms folded, silent and complicit. I watched it twice. Then I opened the camera on my laptop, looked into it, and pressed record. My reflection stared back, aged, worn, eyes circled with exhaustion, but not broken, never broken. "Silence is no longer enough," I said. I held up my phone and played Derek's voice calling me worthless. Then Kelly shouting, "You should be grateful we didn't burn your junk." I stared back at my own face. "My name is Eleanor Caldwell. I am 68 years old. I have lived through loss, illness, childbirth, and betrayal. But this is not how my story ends." I leaned closer. They thought I would stay quiet. They thought my silence meant surrender. I clicked off the recording, renamed the file Declaration. I was no longer waiting for justice. I was calling it forward. The suitcase had been sitting in the back seat for days. I had not opened it since that morning they dumped my life into the driveway. Maybe I had not wanted to see what was broken, or maybe I had been afraid that whatever was still whole might remind me too much of who I used to be. But that afternoon, under a soft light by the window of the small rental room I was staying in, I finally unzipped it. The smell hit me first. Old perfume, dust, and something sour like spoiled memory. I began pulling things out, one by one. My husband's cufflinks, a dried rose from our 20th anniversary, a scarf Leah gave me before she left for her studies, a cracked mug wrapped in an old dish towel. And then I saw it, a small, blue USB drive nestled between 2 paperback books I had packed for vacation reading. I picked it up, turning it in my fingers. It was unmarked, scratched at the corners. I had no idea how it got there. I had never used it. I thought it might be one of Derek's. He had a dozen of these scattered around the house. I plugged it into the laptop. The drive blinked to life. Inside were 3 folders: statements, transcripts, and insurance. I clicked on the first one. My breath stopped. Bank statements, pages and pages of them, were neatly organized by date. They were mine. My account numbers, my name. But the transactions were unfamiliar. Large withdrawals, wire transfers to unfamiliar accounts, online purchases for luxury brands I had never heard of. $3,500, 0 cents at a boutique in New York, $2,200, 0 cents to a designer watch brand, $18,000, 0 cents, transferred to an account listed under a different name, Marcus D. Caldwell. Derek's middle name was Marcus. I clicked into the transcripts folder. Screenshots of text messages between Derek and Kelly discussing how to move money around and complaints about how she still hasn't croaked yet. One thread read, "K, she's too stubborn to die. Then we make her sign everything over before she realizes. K, already halfway done. D, we'll dump the junk, get the equity, and move west." I sat there, the screen glowing in front of me, my stomach a knot of disbelief and recognition. This was not just theft. This was premeditated. It was betrayal, digitized and time-stamped. In the insurance folder, I found scanned applications, health policies, life insurance forms, forged signatures, my name written in Derek's blocky, careless hand. They had opened a policy listing Kelly as the sole beneficiary. If something had happened to me during that vacation, I wonder if they would have even called the ambulance. One form in particular chilled me. A power of attorney document filed without my knowledge, listing Derek as my financial guardian. It had been notarized by someone I had never met. It was all there, motive, method, malice. I backed everything up, then I printed it, pages and pages until the printer hissed from exhaustion. I placed them in a folder, marked it with a black Sharpie, fraud and abuse. I called William, my lawyer. "You need to see this," I said. "There's proof, transfers, forgeries, intent." He came over that same night. He did not say much, just flipped through each page slowly, face unreadable. When he reached the screenshots of the text messages, he stopped, exhaled, and finally looked at me. "This," he said, "is enough to open a federal case." "I want to proceed," I said, quietly, but thoroughly. He nodded. "We'll begin with a formal complaint. I'll submit everything to the FBI's Elder Financial Abuse Division and copy the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation. I'll also notify the Office for the Protection of Seniors and the banks." "What about the house?" I asked. "If they accessed funds from the trust to pay for renovations or mortgages, that becomes part of the discovery. We can challenge ownership." "Then do it," I said. Within 48 hours, Derek's accounts were frozen. A hold was placed on the house under investigation for misuse of trust assets. Kelly's credit cards were declined while shopping at the local store. Leah told me later she had screamed at the cashier, then stormed out, leaving a cart full of items behind. I received a call from the bank manager, Mrs. Lowell. "Mrs. Caldwell," she said cautiously, "we've flagged several irregular activities on your accounts over the past year. I want to personally apologize. We should have seen the red flags." I thanked her, though my voice was cold. Apologies meant little now. Justice, however, meant everything. The final document I submitted was a signed affidavit detailing the abuse, emotional, financial, and psychological, that I had endured over the past 3 years. I included the footage, the texts, and a personal statement handwritten in my kitchen. They thought I was old, confused, a burden. But I remember numbers, I remember dates, and most of all, I remember love, and how it does not look like this. My hands did not shake as I wrote it, they only shook when I sealed the envelope. I placed it in the outgoing mail slot at the post office. A gust of wind caught the door as I let go, but I did not reach back. Let the storm begin. It was 1:07 a.m. when my phone rang. I was already awake. Sleep had become a visitor, not a resident. I had been lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling the soft creak of the old beams above me, listening to the distant hush of the world outside, a world that no longer ignored me. The screen lit up. Kelly Mobile. I let it ring once, twice, 3 times. Then I answered. "Mama," she said, her voice cracked and breathless, as if she had been running or crying. "They're here. The FBI. What did you tell them?" I stared at the ceiling, my mouth calm, voice steady. I told them the truth. For a moment, all I could hear was her breathing, sharp and uneven. Then a choking sound, panic wrapped in disbelief. "They said you filed federal complaints, that you submitted evidence. You went to the banks." "I did. They froze our accounts. Derek can't even buy gas. They put a hold on the house. They're saying I forged insurance documents." "Mama," her voice splintered, "you're gonna ruin us." I sat up, swung my legs over the bed, and let my feet touch the cold wood floor. "You ruined yourselves," I said quietly. "I just stopped protecting the lie." She began to protest, but I ended the call. I did not need to hear her sob. I had cried enough for all of us. The next day, the official letter arrived, an envelope bearing the seal of the Department of Justice. Inside, confirmation that the federal investigation was underway. Derek had been served with a subpoena to produce all financial documents related to my accounts, the trust, and any transfers made in the last 3 years. A separate inquiry had opened under the Elder Abuse Prevention and Prosecution Act. The evidence I had submitted, USB contents, security footage, forged documents, was now in the hands of people who had authority far beyond the reach of Derek's arrogance. I learned through my lawyer that Derek had been called into a preliminary hearing. Kelly had received a formal notice that the life insurance policies opened in my name were under fraud investigation. If convicted, she could face up to 10 years. They had gambled on my silence. They lost. I walked into town that morning to buy a new journal. The old one, filled with clipped grocery receipts, scribbled prayers, and worn corners, had run out of room. I chose a red leather-bound one, firm and weighty in my hand. On the first page I wrote, "Day 1, they called me elderly trash. Today the government calls me a plaintiff." Each night after that, I wrote. I documented every memory, every bruise to my dignity, every whisper I once swallowed. I recorded how many times Kelly said, "You're lucky we let you stay," and how often Derek rolled his eyes when I asked about my own money. I recounted the time they unplugged my oxygen machine because it made the room stuffy, how I would hear them through the thin walls mocking my slippers, laughing at how I made tea like it was a sacred ritual. I wrote it all down, not because I wanted revenge, but because I needed witnesses, even if only the page would listen. One night, I heard from Leah. "Mom," she said, "I saw the news. Local station, they're reporting elder fraud charges filed in Memphis. They didn't name you, but the timeline, it matches." "It's happening," I told her. "I'm proud of you. I'm proud of you." I did not cry. I smiled. She offered to come stay with me, just for a week, maybe 2. I told her I'd love that. That Sunday, a man in a gray suit knocked on my door. He was from the Elder Financial Protection Network. They were launching a regional awareness campaign and asked if I would be willing to speak, to share my story. "Why me?" I asked. "Because you fought back," he said. "Most don't." I thought of that night in the car, how I had curled up like a forgotten package, how I had stayed silent, too shocked to scream, and then how I had gathered broken things, not just objects but parts of myself, and turned them into evidence. I agreed to speak. That evening I wrote in my journal, Day 12. The woman they thought was weak just became a key witness. I began preparing my notes, not just the legal details but the emotional ones. I wrote down how betrayal sounds when it comes from the mouth of your own child. How a house does not feel like home when you are made to tiptoe in it. How silence can be both survival and slow death. When I stood on the church podium the following week, I did not tremble. I looked out at the pews, full of gray hair, canes, clasped hands, and said, "My son told me I was nothing. The government says I am someone again. But I didn't do this alone. I did it because I remembered who I was before they made me forget." When I finished, no one clapped, not because they disagreed, but because the silence in that room was heavier than any applause. It was reverence. It was recognition. They understood. Back home that night, I brewed chamomile tea. The steam curled gently like an old friend. I opened my journal and wrote one final line before bed. Justice does not shout. Sometimes it knocks at 1 a.m., and the liar is the one who answers in fear. And I, finally, slept without waking. It started with a single article. A local paper, the Tennessee Gazette, ran a story with the headline, "Mother Abandoned by Son, but She Saved Herself." The reporter had found the case file through public record. He had traced the timeline, the asset freeze, the fraud investigation. He had spoken with neighbors, courthouse clerks, and even the bank. But most of all, he had watched the footage, the security videos I had handed over, where Derek threw my suitcase, where Kelly dumped trash on me, where I stood still as stone. He did not name me fully. He called me Mrs. C. He used terms like elder neglect, domestic fraud, and silent strength. But everyone in town knew who it was. My phone rang constantly the day it came out. Old friends from church, women I had not spoken to in years, one man I had taught Sunday school with decades ago, all of them saying the same thing in different ways. "We saw. We believe you. We are sorry." That afternoon, Reverend Alden called from the local Baptist church. He asked if I would come speak at their next Wednesday gathering. It was a monthly series called Voices of the Valley, usually reserved for missionaries, doctors, and the occasional author. He said, "We want people to hear what silence looks like and what happens when it ends." I was hesitant. I was not a speaker. I was a woman who had spent most of her life making other people comfortable. But something inside me said yes. The night of the event, the pews were packed. I wore a soft blue cardigan, the one Leah had mailed me last Christmas. As I stepped to the pulpit, I felt a strange calm. Not performance, not fear, just truth, heavy and waiting. I looked at the rows of eyes, many kind, some stunned, and began. I was called elderly trash by the boy I raised. I was thrown out of my home by the woman I once considered a daughter. They said I had no place, that I was a burden. I paused. But I remembered who I was before they forgot, and when the law asked for proof, I had it. I spoke for 20 minutes. I did not read from notes. I told the story plainly, what they did, how I slept in the car, how I found the USB, how I built a case brick by brick from the fragments they thought I would throw away. When I finished, there was silence. Not uncomfortable silence, deep silence. Then a single clap. Then another. Then a wave. Afterward, people lined up to speak with me. A woman hugged me, whispering, "My daughter treats me the same." I thought I was alone. An older man in a worn veteran's cap looked me straight in the eye and said, "My son had me sign over my house while I was in the hospital. Thank you for standing up." A teenage girl said, "My grandma raised me. If anyone ever did that to her, I'd want her to fight like you did." But the one that stayed with me most was a man in his 70s who waited until everyone else had left. He approached, slowly, limping, eyes glassy. "I had to sleep in my shed for 2 weeks last year," he said. "My son said he needed my room for his office, told me I could be out back if I needed space. I still haven't told anyone that. Until now." He shook my hand. It was calloused, strong, but trembling. "You gave me permission to be angry," he said. I nodded. Anger is not wrong, silence is, when it lets abuse grow. That night, as I walked back to the small house Leia and I now shared, the air felt softer, the stars kinder. Inside, she had lit a candle and left out 2 mugs of tea. I sat down, let the warmth bleed into my hands, and opened my journal. Day 30. I spoke. They listened. But most of all, they remembered. And some of them found their voice, too. Justice had not come in a storm. It had come in layers, in documents, in hearings, in a voice that finally refused to tremble. I did not scream. I did not throw plates or curse names. I simply told the truth. And the truth, when spoken clearly, cannot be ignored. The new house was smaller, just 2 bedrooms and a sunroom, but it felt wider than the one they pushed me out of. It sat on the edge of town, near a stretch of woods where cardinals nested, and a modest garden patch that had once been overrun with weeds. Now, it was mine. Ours. Leia helped me turn the soil. She taught me how to compost banana peels and eggshells, and I showed her how to string beans along the wooden trellis like my mother once did. We planted rosemary, lavender, tomatoes. By week 3, tiny green sprouts had started to nudge through the dirt like shy children. In the mornings, I made scones while she read emails. We took turns sweeping the porch and feeding the cat that had adopted us without asking permission. I named him Henry. There were no shouts in this house, no slammed doors, no footsteps that made you hold your breath. Only the quiet hum of the oven, the rustle of leaves brushing the windows, and Leah's occasional laughter drifting down the hallway like music. Sometimes I woke in the middle of the night, heart pounding, the echo of Derek's voice still ricocheting through my mind. But then I would hear Henry's soft purring or see the nightlight we had plugged in for comfort, and I would remember. This house was built on kindness, not ownership. Leah had made sure of that. She insisted the deed be in my name alone, with a clause stating I could not be evicted, not even by her. I had laughed at the absurdity, but she had looked me in the eyes and said, "No more loopholes, Mom, not again." I cried then, the kind of cry you only let out when you are safe enough to fall apart. And yet, healing does not always arrive gently. Sometimes it wears a familiar face. It was a Thursday afternoon when I saw him. I was weeding the herb bed when a car I recognized slowed to a stop in front of the house. It was Derek's, his silver sedan that still bore a dent from when he hit a mailbox last winter. He stepped out slowly. He had lost weight, his face was pale, shoulders hunched. The usual arrogance was gone, replaced with something harder to name. He walked up the path without looking me in the eye. "Mom?" he said, barely above a whisper. I said nothing. He stood there, shuffling his feet, hands clenched and unclenched at his sides. I don't expect anything. I need to say it." I waited. "I was wrong," he said. "About everything. About what I did to you, what I let her do. I've lost everything. They're charging me. Kelly's left. The bank won't even look at me. But I know that's not the worst part. The worst part is what I did to you and what I became. His voice cracked. I came to say I'm sorry. I looked at him then. Really looked. He was still my son. But he was not the boy who had once brought me wildflowers from the backyard or built Lego towers in my lap. That boy had been gone long before the suitcase hit the porch. This man, broken, trembling, seeking, was someone else. Do you want forgiveness? I asked softly. He nodded. I paused. Forgiveness is a door I can open, I said, but trust is a house you burn down, and I am not rebuilding it. He blinked, tears pooling in his eyes. That's fair, he said. I nodded. It is. He stood there for a few moments longer, then turned and walked back to his car. He did not ask to come in. He did not ask for money. For once he asked for nothing but a truth he could carry. That night I made cinnamon rolls. Leah and I ate them on the porch, with warm cider, and Henry curled at our feet. The stars above us were clear and close, and the garden below was silent, except for the sound of leaves brushing against each other. I thought about what it means to be a mother, how often it means giving without receiving, how sometimes even your best isn't enough to stop someone from choosing darkness. But I also thought about what it means to survive that, to still bake bread, to still plant flowers, to still leave the door of your heart unlocked, even if you never open it again. In my journal that evening, I wrote, Day 45, he came, he knelt. I turned away, not out of cruelty but clarity. Not every apology earns a welcome. Some just deserve acknowledgement. And with that, I closed the book and let the night do what it does best, hold what we are not ready to forget. It was Leah's idea to record the story. She said, You've written it in your journal, you've spoken at the church, but there are millions of women out there who don't get a room full of people to listen. I smiled, brushing flour from my hands as we finished kneading the bread dough for the evening. You think people want to hear an old woman talk about betrayal and court papers? I think people want to hear the truth, she said, placing the loaf into the oven. Especially from someone who lived it. That night she set up a small camera on the dining room table. The soft yellow lamp behind it gave the video a warmth that made the room feel less like a confession booth and more like a conversation. Henry, the cat, curled up by my feet, purring like an engine set to low. Leah hit record, and I began. My name is Eleanor Caldwell. I am a mother, a widow, a gardener, and most recently, a survivor of financial abuse. But I don't tell you that to gain pity. I tell you because I was once silent, and I want you to know that silence is not the same as weakness. I spoke slowly, from memory. I did not read from a script. I told them about Derek's voice yelling in the hallway, the suitcase on the porch, the cold car seat that became my bed for the night. I told them about the photos in the rain, the USB drive, the forged documents, and the letter from the DOJ. I told them about my quiet mornings with tea, my determination to learn the law, and the sound of justice knocking on a door that used to be mine. But I also spoke of healing, of rosemary sprouting by the back fence, of laughter returning to the kitchen, of Leah who never forgot me, even when I forgot how to fight for myself. I spoke for 34 minutes. When I finished, Leah wiped her eyes. She clicked upload and titled the video, A True Story About This Grandma I Slept in My Car. By morning, they were the ones outside. She uploaded it to a channel she had created days earlier, Grandma True Stories. We didn't expect much. But the next morning, there were 112 views. By lunchtime, 900. That night, it crossed 12,000. And the comments? Lord, the comments. One read, She reminds me of my mother. She never fought back. I wish she had. Another, I'm 42. My daughter calls me a burden. But tonight, I'm going to start writing everything down. And this one, the one that made me press my palm against my heart. You gave us all permission to speak. I spent that entire weekend replying to as many as I could. Leah helped me set up a second video, just to thank them for listening. My voice was hoarse by the end, but my heart had never felt more full. The house no longer echoed with silence, it buzzed with purpose. Emails came in, messages from daughters, sons, caregivers, women from Idaho to Ireland. One said, "My grandson laughed when I told him I had a story to tell. I played him your video. He cried." I wasn't famous. I wasn't viral in the way the young ones use the word, but I was seen. And for someone who had been invisible in her own home, that mattered more than any view count. Weeks passed. Then a letter arrived, from a woman named Beverly in Nebraska. She wrote, "I printed your story and put it on my refrigerator. My husband read it. For the first time in years, he apologized. Not because he was as cruel as your son, but because he had stopped listening to me. You made us both remember who I was before I was just his wife." I read it 3 times. Then I cried. Not the hollow kind of crying that comes from loss, but the deep, full kind that comes from being understood. Later that evening, I sat on the porch while the wind rattled the branches. The sun dipped low, casting gold along the rim of the garden. Leah came out with 2 mugs of tea, handed me one, and sat beside me. "Still think no one wants to hear what you've been through?" she asked, grinning. I chuckled softly. "I think maybe I wasn't meant to stay quiet." We sat there a long while. Finally, I said, almost to myself, "You know, children forget. They forget who stayed up with them when they were sick, who worked double shifts to afford cleats for soccer, who taught them to say please and thank you, who skipped meals so they could eat more." Leah nodded, her eyes soft. "But mothers," I said, "we never forget. We remember every scraped knee, every whispered secret at bedtime. We remember, even when we're told we're no longer needed." I looked out into the twilight. So when we speak, it's not to punish. It's not even to reclaim. It's to restore something they didn't even know they lost. The truth. I finished my tea, placed the cup gently on the railing, and stood. That night, I wrote the final entry in my journal. Day 60. My voice once lived in the quiet. Now it lives on a screen, and in the hearts of strangers who, like me, once thought they were too old to matter. I did not seek vengeance. I sought clarity, and in the process, I found a community of women who carry truth like a lantern, burning steady even when the room pretends they are not there. My story isn't rare. That's the tragedy. But now at least, it's not hidden. And so I close the book, not because the story ends here, but because it has finally been heard. Thank you for listening. If my story reminded you of someone you love, or someone you used to be, then you already understand why silence is never the final chapter. There are thousands of grandmothers, mothers, and women out there who've been told they're too old, too soft, or too forgotten to matter. But here on Grandma True Stories, we remember, we speak, and we reclaim the dignity that was never meant to be taken. So if you believe in quiet strength, in justice without shouting, in stories that heal and reveal, please subscribe to Grandma True Stories, because the world needs to hear what grandmothers remember. And some stories are too true to stay buried. Subscribe and be part of the voice that never fades.